My name's Rachel, I'm 29, and I never thought the people who raised me would push me out of their lives with a single group message. One morning, my phone lit up with the words, "We think it's best you step away for now." That was from my own parents. And the reply my aunt sent after, it changed everything. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family drama and emotional courage. I'll never forget that morning. The air was still heavy with sleep, and the first bit of sunlight slipped past the blinds, warming the corner of my bed. I reached for my phone out of habit, expecting the usual, maybe a weather alert or a work email I didn't want to see. Instead, what I saw made my stomach twist. A new message blinked in the family group chat. My parents had sent it, short and final, "We think it's best you step away for now." At first, I thought I had misread it. I rubbed my eyes and read it again, slower this time. But the words didn't change. The meaning hit harder with every second. My own parents were asking me to remove myself, like I was a stranger who didn't belong. The silence of the room grew louder, broken only by the faint hum of the fridge down the hall. I sat there, frozen, clutching my phone, wondering how something so permanent could be written so casually. Before I had time to react, another notification pinged. My aunt. She replied almost instantly, her words sharp. "Are you serious? After everything she's done for you?" My eyes stung. It was the first time in years someone had spoken up for me so directly, and it came from the one person who had nothing to gain. Her reaction told me this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a betrayal, plain and simple. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Why now? Why like this? Just last week, I dropped off groceries at their house because Mom said the fridge looked bare. A month ago, I'd helped Dad with his car repairs, crawling under the hood in the July heat while he sat in a lawn chair, barking instructions. I didn't complain, because that's what family does, or at least that's what I believed. But apparently, family also decides when you've overstayed your welcome. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen. My hands shook as I poured coffee, spilling a little on the counter. The smell of roasted beans filled the room, but it couldn't calm me. Each sip was bitterer than usual, almost metallic. I leaned against the counter, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of years pressing down on me. I thought back to all the small sacrifices that had piled up like bricks. Birthdays spent running errands for my parents instead of celebrating with friends. Paychecks chipped away by loans that were never repaid. Weekends consumed by chores that weren't mine, while my siblings stayed conveniently unavailable. It wasn't one big moment that broke me, it was a lifetime of being the safety net nobody thanked. The phone buzzed again, and my chest tightened. I half expected another blow, but it was just my aunt, sending me a private message this time. "Don't let them do this to you. You deserve better." Simple words, but they cracked something inside me. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed anyone, to say I wasn't imagining it, that I wasn't the crazy one for feeling used. I sat at the table, phone in hand, debating whether to reply to the group chat. My first instinct was to defend myself, to type out a list of everything I had done for them. But my fingers hovered over the keyboard, stiff. Would it even matter? They had already decided. My words would be skimmed, maybe ignored, then brushed aside with another dismissive remark. Instead, I opened the photos on my phone, scrolling back through the years. Pictures of me hauling boxes during their move. Smiling in front of a Thanksgiving turkey I cooked while Mom entertained guests. Sitting beside Dad in a hospital waiting room after his surgery, exhaustion written all over my face. Every photo felt like proof, but proof that only I seemed to recognize. By mid-morning, the coffee had gone cold, untouched. I stood and paced the living room, restless energy pushing me from one wall to the other. The house felt too quiet, too small, like the walls themselves were closing in. I couldn't shake the thought, they didn't even call me. Just a text. Just one cold, typed sentence. I thought about driving over right then and there, demanding answers face to face. But another part of me hesitated. If they could so easily push me aside in a text, what would they say in person? Would they even open the door? A memory surfaced suddenly last Christmas. Everyone had gathered at my parents' house, laughter echoing from the living room. I was in the kitchen, alone, scrubbing pots and pans while the others drank eggnog and exchanged gifts. Mom had peeked in once, smiled faintly, and said, "You've always been so helpful." Then she walked away. At the time, I swallowed the bitterness, told myself it was fine. But now, standing in my silent apartment, the truth hit me. They never saw me as part of the celebration. I was just the one who kept it all running. My phone rang. It was my aunt. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was firm but gentle. "Rachel, listen to me. Don't let them break you. They've leaned on you for too long, and now they want to act like you're the problem. I won't stand for it." I pressed the phone closer, my throat tight. "Why would they do this, Aunt May? After everything?" She sighed. "Because admitting they've used you means admitting their own failures. It's easier to push you away than face themselves." Her words sank deep, heavier than I wanted to admit. For the first time in years, I felt seen, really seen. And with that came something unfamiliar: anger. Not the fleeting kind that fades with an apology, but a steady, burning flame I hadn't allowed myself to feel. I hung up after promising to meet her later. Then I sat on the couch, staring at the family group chat still open on my phone. My parents hadn't followed up. No explanation. No call. Just silence, as if their message had neatly wrapped up the conversation. But for me, it was only the beginning. I stared at the phone screen a long while after the group chat fell silent. My parents' words were still there, bold against the white background, like a wound carved in pixels. Yet what unsettled me more was how quickly I began to question myself. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I had been leaning too hard on them without realizing it. That thought didn't last long, though. Because when I looked back honestly, I realized my entire relationship with them had been built on one thing: sacrifice. My sacrifices. I thought of the nights when I was barely out of high school, working late shifts at the diner, sliding tip money into an envelope so Mom could pay the power bill. I told myself then that it was temporary, that once my parents got back on their feet, things would balance out. But balance never came. My 20s blurred into a string of just this once favors: covering rent, buying groceries, fixing things around the house until it wasn't favors anymore. It was expected. One memory hit me especially hard. I was 22, driving an old Chevy that coughed more than it purred. My sister, Jessica, called late one night, panicked because her car had broken down after a party. She was stranded 30 miles away. Dad told me to go pick her up. Not asked, told. I left my shift early, risking my job, and drove through sleet on bald tires to get her. When I finally brought her home, cold and exhausted, my parents didn't even look at me. They rushed to Jessica, wrapping her in blankets, thanking her for calling. I stood there, dripping water onto the carpet, invisible. It wasn't just money or errands. It was time. Precious time I could have spent living my own life. When friends invited me on weekend trips, I turned them down because Mom needed help organizing the garage or Dad wanted me to mow the lawn before the neighbors complained. I told myself that was what good daughters did. But sometimes, alone in my room, I'd cry quietly, wishing just once someone would ask what I wanted. The sacrifices grew heavier as years passed. When Mom slipped and hurt her back, I spent months running their household while working full-time. I cooked, cleaned, managed bills, and drove her to appointments. My brothers came by occasionally with flowers or a card, and each time they were treated like heroes. "You boys are so thoughtful," Mom would beam, while I scrubbed dishes in the background, sweat dripping down my neck. The injustice of it settled in my chest like a stone. It wasn't only that they overlooked me, it was how they praised everyone else for doing so little. I was the steady, unshakable one, the person they leaned on without hesitation, yet I was always the one least recognized. As I sat in my apartment that morning, coffee cooling in my hands, I realized something else. My sacrifices had never been about choice. They had been demanded. If I ever said no, the guilt came swiftly. Dad's voice would drop, sharp and disappointed. I thought family came first. Mom's sighs were even worse, heavy with unspoken judgment. "Well, I guess I'll figure it out on my own." The weight of those words was unbearable, so I kept saying yes, again and again. I remembered the day I had to choose between attending a job interview and driving them to a family barbecue because Dad's truck wouldn't start. I gave up the interview, convincing myself another opportunity would come. It didn't. I was stuck in the same low-paying job for years because every chance I had to move forward got swallowed by their needs. Not every memory was bitter, though. There were quiet moments when I felt proud of what I did. Like the night I stayed with Mom in the ER after her panic attack. She held my hand, whispering she didn't know what she'd do without me. Or the afternoon I fixed the leaky roof while Dad sat with his coffee, nodding in approval. Those moments felt like love, fleeting as they were. But looking back, I can see they were more about dependence than appreciation. My aunt was different. She'd always noticed the imbalance. She'd make little comments at family gatherings, like, "Rachel's always the one in the kitchen, why don't you let her sit down for once?" My parents brushed it off with laughs, calling me the responsible one, as though that excused the weight they kept piling on me. I remembered one Thanksgiving especially well. The turkey had come out dry, and Mom was fuming in the kitchen, blaming the oven. I had spent the entire day basting, chopping, timing every side dish down to the minute. When Dad carved the bird and everyone complained, it was me who took the brunt of Mom's glare. Later, when everyone left, I stood at the sink washing dishes until midnight. My aunt slipped in quietly and started drying plates beside me. "You don't deserve this," she whispered. At the time, I brushed it off, embarrassed. Now, her words rang louder than ever. Sitting in my apartment that morning, the group chat still open, I thought about how my parents had never once asked about the toll it all took on me. They never asked how many times I cried myself to sleep after stretching my paycheck too thin. They never knew about the night I fainted at work from exhaustion because I'd been running from job to chore without rest. They never cared enough to ask. I walked to the window, staring at the street below. The world outside felt indifferent, but at least it was honest. My phone buzzed again, another private message from my aunt. "They'll regret this one day. You've given them more than anyone else ever has." Her words steadied me, reminding me of the truth I'd buried for so long. I had been sacrificing myself piece by piece, and they had mistaken it for obligation. As the morning wore on, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time, I allowed myself to name what I had been feeling for years: resentment. It wasn't petty or mean-spirited. It was the rightful weight of a lifetime of giving without return. My parents' message wasn't just a betrayal. It was the final confirmation that my sacrifices had never been seen, never been valued, never been enough. And with that realization came something I didn't expect, a spark of strength. Maybe I had lost years to their demands, but I still had myself. I still had time. And I wasn't going to keep wasting it on people who couldn't see me. The phone stayed quiet after that, the group chat frozen in silence. But inside me, the noise of years of quiet sacrifices was finally breaking through. By afternoon, I couldn't sit still anymore. The silence in the apartment pressed down like a weight. My parents' words, still glowing in the group chat, felt heavier with every passing minute. I had spent years giving them everything I had, and now they'd tossed me aside with a single message. Something in me snapped. I grabbed my keys, slipped on my jacket, and drove straight to their house. The drive felt longer than usual, even though I knew the roads by heart. Every turn seemed sharper, every stoplight slower. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than I realized, knuckles pale against the leather. A knot twisted in my stomach, part dread, part anger. For years I had swallowed my feelings, but not this time. When I pulled into their driveway, I sat for a moment, engine humming. Their house looked the same as always: white siding, flower pots by the porch, the flag swaying lazily in the breeze. It was almost insulting, how ordinary it looked. From the outside, no one would guess that inside waited people who had just exiled their own daughter. I pushed open the door without knocking. My parents never locked it during the day. The familiar creak of the hinges echoed louder than usual, as though even the house was startled by my unannounced arrival. The smell of coffee hung faintly in the air, mixed with lemon-scented cleaner. They were in the living room. Dad sat in his recliner, glasses perched on his nose, reading the paper. Mom was on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling. They both looked up when I stepped in, their expressions shifting from mild surprise to guarded irritation. "Rachel," Mom said first, her tone clipped. "You could have called." "Called?" My voice cracked with disbelief. "After the message you sent me this morning? You wanted me to call first?" Dad folded his paper, setting it on his lap. "We didn't think you'd take it so dramatically. It was just something we felt needed to be said." I stared at them, words piling in my throat faster than I could form them. My hands trembled, but I steadied them at my sides. "Dramatically? You told me to step away. Like I'm some burden you can just dismiss. After everything I've done for you." Mom sighed, shifting uncomfortably. "Rachel, you've been tense lately. You always seem on edge. It's not healthy for you or for us." My chest burned. On edge? Do you ever stop to wonder why? I've given up years of my life to keep this family afloat. Every bill you couldn't pay, every problem you didn't want to face, I was there. And now you tell me I'm the problem? Dad leaned forward, voice firmer now. "You make it sound like we forced you. No one asked you to give so much." I laughed, a sharp sound that startled even me. "No one asked. You guilt me every single time I tried to say no. You held family over my head like a weapon. And I believed you. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I see now I was just convenient for you." Mom's face flushed, her lips tightening. "That's not fair. You're twisting things." "No," I shot back, my voice rising. "What's not fair is spending my 20s cleaning up your messes while my siblings got to live their lives. What's not fair is you praising them for showing up once a month while I broke myself to keep you comfortable. And you still couldn't say thank you. Not once." For a moment, the room fell silent except for the clock ticking on the wall. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. My parents avoided my eyes, staring at the floor, at the table, at anything but me. Just then, the front door creaked again. I turned to see Aunt May step inside, her face set in a hard line. She must have driven over after my call earlier. "I knew you'd come here," she said, walking straight into the living room. Her gaze flicked between me and my parents. "Good. Because this needed to happen." Mom stiffened. "May, this isn't your business." "Like hell it isn't," Aunt May snapped. "I've watched for years while Rachel carried this family on her back, while you two acted like it was nothing. And now you send her that message? Shame on you." Dad shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. "You don't know the whole story." "I know enough," she shot back. "I know Rachel was the one who kept your lights on when the bills piled up. I know she was the one driving you to appointments, fixing what was broken, holding this family together when the rest of us couldn't. And I know you never gave her the credit she deserved." My throat tightened as she spoke, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Hearing someone else say it out loud felt like a dam breaking. For years, I'd carried those truths quietly, afraid to voice them. Now they filled the room, undeniable. Mom finally looked at me, her eyes sharp but unsettled. "Rachel, you're making this bigger than it needs to be. Families go through things. We just thought you needed space." "Space?" I whispered, my voice trembling with anger. "You wanted space from the one person who never left you. The one who sacrificed everything. You didn't want space, Mom. You wanted silence. You wanted me to stop reminding you of what you owe me." Her mouth opened, then closed again, words failing her. Dad rubbed his temples, muttering something about always turning into drama. That did it. I stood taller, my hands steady now. "You can call it drama if it makes you feel better. But this isn't drama, it's truth. And you can't hide from it anymore." The silence that followed was crushing. Mom shifted uncomfortably on the couch, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. Dad leaned back in his chair, his face set but weary. Neither of them spoke. For once, they had no easy excuses. I looked at Aunt May. She gave me the smallest nod, as if to say, "You've said what needed saying." The room felt different now. The weight I had carried for so long wasn't gone, but it had shifted. It was no longer mine alone. I had placed it in front of them, where it belonged. Whether they chose to face it or not was no longer my responsibility. I turned toward the door, my chest heaving, heart pounding against my ribs. Behind me, the living room was quiet, heavy with truths too long ignored. I didn't wait for their response. For the first time in years, I didn't need it. The screen door slammed shut behind me, rattling in its frame, and I stood on the porch with the cool air hitting my face. My hands were trembling, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from release. 4 years, every confrontation had been swallowed, smoothed over, silenced before it could start. But not this time. I had left my words hanging in the air of that living room like a storm cloud they couldn't ignore. The driveway stretched before me, my car waiting like an anchor to freedom. I took a step toward it, then stopped. My breath came uneven, my chest heaving as though I'd run a race. It wasn't enough just to leave, the weight inside me still pressed heavy, begging for something more. Behind me, the door creaked open. "Rachel," a voice called softly. I turned. It wasn't Mom or Dad. It was my younger brother, Daniel, standing awkwardly in the doorway. He'd slipped in while the shouting had erupted, I hadn't even noticed. His hair was messy, shirt wrinkled, as if he'd rushed over after hearing something was happening. His eyes darted nervously, not quite meeting mine. I heard," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "All of it." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Good. Saves me from having to repeat it." He winced but stepped outside, letting the door click shut behind him. For a moment, we just stood there in the fading afternoon light, the air filled with the distant sound of birds and the low hum of a lawnmower down the street. "You weren't wrong," Daniel said finally, voice quiet. "About the sacrifices. About how much you did. I guess I never let myself think about it because, well, it was easier not to." I studied him, trying to decide if this was another one of those half-hearted sympathies that faded the moment he walked back inside. "Easier for you, maybe," I said. "Not for me. I know." He shifted his weight, guilt flickering across his face. "I should have helped more. I should have stepped up. I didn't." For the first time, I saw him not as the golden child who slipped by unnoticed, but as someone weighed down by his own quiet failures. It didn't excuse anything, but it softened something sharp inside me. "You can't change the past," I told him. "But you can stop pretending it didn't happen." Daniel nodded, his throat bobbing. "I'm sorry, Rachel. Truly." The words landed differently than I expected. Not enough to erase years, but enough to spark something fragile: acknowledgement. And maybe, for the first time, I wasn't the only one carrying the truth. Aunt May stepped out then, arms folded, her gaze steady. "I'll drive behind you, just to make sure you're okay getting home," she said. I shook my head. "I'll be fine. Humor me," she said gently, and there was no fight left in me to argue. I slid into my car, the seat creaking under me, and started the engine. Daniel lingered on the porch, lifting a hand in a small, uncertain wave. I didn't wave back, but I didn't turn away either. It was enough that he had seen me. That was its own turning point. The drive back was different than the drive there. The roads hadn't changed, but the weight in my chest had shifted. I noticed the way the sunlight cut through the trees, the way the wind tugged at the edges of my jacket. The world seemed sharper, almost daring me to notice it again, as if it had been waiting for me to look up. By the time I reached my apartment, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving me raw, trembling, exhausted. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch, pressing my palms to my eyes. For the first time in years, the silence in my apartment didn't feel lonely, it felt like mine. The truth I had spoken back in that living room echoed in my mind. Ugly, messy, undeniable. And though it hadn't fixed anything, it had shifted everything. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from an unknown number. I frowned and opened it. "Rachel, it's Aunt May. Just wanted to say you did the right thing today. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. I typed back, "Thank you for being there." Almost immediately, her reply came, "Always. Now rest. You need it." I set the phone aside and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I let myself imagine a life beyond the constant sacrifices. A life where my worth wasn't tied to how much I could endure for others. The thought was terrifying, but it was also liberating. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. I didn't know if Mom and Dad would ever acknowledge the truth I had laid before them. But I knew this. Today, something had shifted inside me. The truth wasn't just something I had spoken out loud. It was something I had finally claimed for myself. The night deepened outside my window, city lights flickering against the glass. I curled under a blanket, my body heavy with exhaustion, but my mind strangely light. For once, I wasn't rehearsing excuses or worrying about the next demand. I was simply still. And in that stillness, I realized, the turning point of truth isn't in whether others accept it. It's in whether I do. For the first time in years, I did. The blanket cocooned me in a warmth I hadn't felt in years, yet sleep refused to come. My mind, restless and sharp, replayed every word I had spoken in that living room, every flicker of disbelief on my parents' faces. For a moment, the old reflex stirred, the desperate urge to smooth things over, to call them and take it all back. The guilt pressed like a stone on my chest, whispering its familiar script: "You hurt them. You're ungrateful. You'll regret this." I sat up, hugging my knees. The apartment was quiet except for the steady hum of the fridge. My phone lay inches away, screen dark, daring me to reach for it. My parents hadn't called, not a single message, and the silence felt heavier than any shouted argument. I stared at the phone until my vision blurred. Then, almost without realizing it, I stood and went to the window. The city stretched out below, alive and unbothered, headlights weaving like fireflies. People out there were moving forward with their lives, unburdened by my choices, untouched by my family's silence. A strange thought struck me: maybe the world didn't end just because my parents refused to understand me. Still, the guilt clawed at me. I closed the curtains, forcing myself away from the view. My feet carried me into the kitchen, where I filled a glass of water. The reflection in the window above the sink caught me, my face tired, but different. Lighter, somehow. A knock startled me. Sharp, quick, unexpected. My heart leapt as I set down the glass and walked to the door. "Rachel?" It was Aunt May's voice. I opened the door to find her standing there, clutching a paper bag that smelled faintly of soup. "I know it's late," she said, her tone soft, "but I thought you might not have eaten." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said simply, stepping inside. She set the bag on the counter, pulling out containers and 2 spoons. "But I wanted to." The soup was warm, the steam curling upward as we sat at the tiny table. Neither of us spoke at first. The quiet between us wasn't heavy like the silence from my parents, it was steady, safe. Finally, Aunt May said, "You look different." I frowned. "Different how?" "Like someone who stopped carrying something that wasn't theirs to carry." She stirred her soup. "But I also see the guilt trying to sneak back in." I pressed my lips together, ashamed of how quickly she'd read me. "It feels wrong to choose myself. Like I've betrayed them." She set down her spoon and leaned closer. "Rachel, choosing yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival. Don't confuse guilt with loyalty." Her words hit me with the weight of truth. My chest tightened, then loosened, as though a knot had been untangled. "Still," I whispered, "but what if they never forgive me?" Aunt May reached across the table, her hand firm over mine. "Then that's their choice. You've already made yours." Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. For years, guilt had been my compass, dictating every move, every sacrifice. But now, for the first time, I realized it didn't have to be. After she left, the apartment smelled faintly of soup and comfort. I washed the bowls slowly, letting the warm water run over my hands. Freedom was a fragile thing. I realized it didn't arrive all at once. It came in moments, small decisions stacked one after another until they built something stronger than guilt. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. I sat with a cup of coffee, scrolling aimlessly through my emails, when a new message appeared. The subject line made my stomach twist, "From Mom." For a long moment, I couldn't open it. My finger hovered, then pulled back. But freedom, I reminded myself, wasn't about running forever, it was about facing things on my own terms. I clicked. The message was brief. "We're hurt. We don't understand why you said what you did. Call us when you're ready to talk properly." Properly. The word stung, as though everything I'd confessed had been dismissed as nothing more than improper behavior. I set the phone down, my coffee suddenly bitter on my tongue. The guilt surged again, demanding I reply, demanding I apologize. But beneath it, another voice spoke, quiet, steady. "You told the truth. That was proper. That was enough." I didn't reply. Not then. Instead, I slipped on my shoes and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up in a way coffee never could. I walked without a plan, letting my feet carry me down the block, past the corner store, past a group of kids laughing on their bikes. Every step away from my apartment felt like a step further from the cage guilt had built around me. At the park, I sat on a bench and watched the morning unfold, dogs tugging on leashes, joggers passing with earbuds in, the distant chatter of friends sharing bagels. The ordinary rhythm of life pulsed around me, and for once, I felt part of it, not apart from it. A little girl ran past chasing a balloon that slipped from her grip, and instinctively, I caught the string before it floated away. She stopped, eyes wide, then broke into a grin as I handed it back. "Thank you," she chirped before darting off. I watched her go, the balloon bobbing cheerfully above her head. Such a small thing, but in that moment, I felt lighter. Maybe freedom wasn't about grand gestures, it was about choosing joy in the smallest of moments, refusing to let guilt steal them. When I returned home, I felt a quiet strength inside me. My parents' silence, their dismissal, it no longer defined me. My worth wasn't tethered to their approval. I sat at my desk, pulled out a notebook, and began to write. Not for them. Not even for Aunt May. But for me. I wrote about the sacrifices, the silence, the confrontation, the turning point, and now, the choice. With every line, the guilt loosened its grip, replaced by something stronger, freedom. By the time the sun dipped low, my notebook was filled with pages of truth, raw and unpolished. I leaned back, exhausted but alive. The guilt still lingered, faint as a shadow. But for the first time, I didn't mistake it for duty. I let it sit quietly while I chose something else. I chose freedom.